Welcome to the mysterious world of real horror stories. Here, we'll guide you through dark alleys where the truth can be even scarier than fiction. Each story holds valuable lessons and unforgettable experiences. If you're ready to explore strange encounters and unexplainable secrets, hit that like button and subscribe now to start. A few years back, I embarked on a solo road trip to California. One of my close friends had relocated there, and since I had never been to the state before, I was eager to visit and explore some of its amazing sights. I planned to make the journey in roughly 2 days. On the first day, I drove from sunrise until well after sunset, pushing past my limits. I took a few breaks to grab food and stretch my legs, but for the most part, I was on the road the entire time. I had booked a hotel online and had the address of it on my phone. By the time I was about 30 minutes out from the hotel, it was probably about 10:30 p.m. I knew that I was going to be taking an exit up ahead in about 20 minutes. As more time went by, I felt like the exit should be approaching. I looked at my phone to see how close it was, and just as I looked at it, I saw the phone turned off. It had died. I tried turning it back on, but I realized that it was indeed dead. I had a car charger, but it had been having some problems recently. At the time, it was one of those old chargers that sometimes randomly wouldn't work, or you would have to mess around with it for a while before it worked. I got the charger and tried plugging it into the phone and turning it on, but nothing happened. I kept driving and saw some exits coming up. I just guessed that these were the ones I was supposed to take. I didn't know for sure, but I was hoping that I would be correct. Maybe if I drove down the exit, I would see the hotel or a sign for it or something. So I took the exit and went to the right. I passed by an old gas station, but that was about it. As I continued to drive down this road, things were much quieter. The roads didn't have any other cars on them at all. I drove along the road for probably 2 or 3 miles. At that point, I realized that I didn't really know where I was going and I had probably taken the wrong exit. I wanted to figure it out though, so I pulled over to the side of the road that I was on. Then I took the charger and tried to figure out what was wrong. I unplugged it, plugged it back in, and started moving it around, trying to get it to work. I sat there in my car for a few minutes trying everything I could to get the charger to charge my phone, but nothing seemed to work. It seemed as though that charger had finally bit the dust for good. I realized that I would have to buy a new one, but still, I had to get to the hotel and I didn't even know where it was. I remember I looked up, and suddenly I saw headlights. A car had pulled over to the side of the road behind me. It was several car lengths back, and at first I thought that maybe it was police. But looking at the headlights, it didn't really seem like a police car. Plus, there were no flashing red and blue lights, just normal headlights. I waited for a minute or two to see if anybody would get out or something. They didn't though. Then I decided to merge back onto this quiet road. There were literally no other cars around, just us 2 cars pulled over on the side of the road right here. It was really strange. I didn't know why this person had pulled over, and on both sides of the road, it was just wild land and woods. So I put my car in drive and slowly went back out onto the road. When I did, I noticed almost immediately after me that the car behind me did the same. This gave me a bad feeling. Why would this person want to follow me? I should have turned around and gone back to the highway right then and there, but I didn't. The fact that the car behind me left right after me got me distracted. I kept going down that road for a little while, and at the first opportunity to turn that I had, I took it. I wanted to see what the car would do behind me when I turned. The car did as well. Now I was really worried. I drove down this other random road for a while, and then I turned again. The car behind me did that as well. I really wanted to get away from it. This road was even more secluded though. There were no street lights, and the only visibility was coming from my headlights and those of the car following me. I knew that I had to turn around and just go back to the main road. So I was approaching a larger intersection after driving down this road for another 5 minutes. I knew that I could turn left or right, but my plan was to turn left and go back to the highway. When I reached the intersection, I turned left, and as soon as I did, the car behind me sped up and turned in the same direction. I knew for sure now that this person was following me. I could see their headlights speeding up right behind me. At this point, I was feeling scared. I had no idea why they were following me or what they wanted. I had no cell phone, and I knew I needed to get back to a well-lit area or town or something. I drove faster. I couldn't go above the speed limit too much because there were no other cars, and I didn't want to draw attention to myself, but I was going as fast as I could. Eventually, I came to another intersection and decided to take a right. That was when the car behind me swerved into the other lane and passed me. As the car went by, I glanced at it quickly and could see that it was a man driving, but I couldn't see much else. Now that I was in the back of him, I noticed that he wasn't driving very fast, so I followed him. I figured that maybe he was trying to lead me back to town. After several minutes, I followed him into a gas station. It was a pretty large station and much busier than the last one I had passed. The man parked his car and got out. I felt relieved at this point. I realized that I could finally get out of this situation. I parked my car and hopped out too. I saw the man go into the store. He seemed like a normal guy. I felt almost stupid for being so paranoid. I walked over to the front and stood at the door waiting for someone to come and help me. The cashier inside was a young girl, and she asked if I was okay. I said that I needed to get my phone charged and asked if they had any chargers for sale. She said that they did not, but she offered to let me charge my phone at the register. I felt a lot better knowing that I was in a safe place and that I could get my phone charged. When I walked up to the register, I decided to glance back and see what the man was doing. I noticed that he was in the store, standing near the coffee station, and was watching me. He was just standing there, not doing anything, but it still made me feel uneasy. I hurried back to the counter and plugged my phone in, and the cashier helped me find a way to charge it quickly. I was grateful and felt relieved that I was safe. I'm a female, and I went to a college that was really far away from where I was from. It was several states away. Every time I went to and from college, it would be a bit of a road trip. One time in particular, I was coming home for the summer. It was a 10-hour drive, and there were actually a couple of times where I did the whole drive in one day. But this time I was going to be making it in 2. I was going to stop at a hotel when it got really late. So that first day I drove for a really long time until it got late and I couldn't go any further. I was really tired, and it was probably like 11. I was still a good 4 hours or so from home, so I decided to stop for some sleep. First, though, I went to a gas station. It was a larger one that was probably very common for people on road trips to stop at. There were quite a few trucks parked in the back for the night. I had to use the restroom, so I parked and got out, then went inside of the store. There were a few other people inside, probably on road trips like me. I remember that after using the bathroom, I got an energy drink and saw that there was just one person working at the register. There was a line of a few people waiting to check out, so I got in line. Then I remembered that this one guy got in line behind me. When he did, he tapped me on the shoulder and started talking to me. The guy had sort of long hair, was wearing a hat, and kind of had a gruff look to him. He was holding a 6-pack of natural light beer, and after saying hi to me, he asked if I was on a road trip. I said yes, I was going home from college. The man asked me where I was from, and I told him. Then, surprisingly, he asked me if I needed a ride. I said no, and I was confused because I had literally just told him that I was on a road trip. He continued to talk to me, though, asking me several more random questions before it was my turn to check out. After I did, I walked back to my car. I I remember that when I got to my car, I noticed a man leaving the store with the beer and cigarettes as well. He walked to this blue, really rusty old pickup truck that was parked sort of far away from my car. I then started up my car to leave, but realized that I was sort of low on gas, so I decided to fill up now so I wouldn't have to do it in the morning. I backed up to an open gas pump and then fueled my car. Afterwards, I drove to a nearby motel. It was just this cheap motel, and it was a pretty short way down the street. I arrived, checked in, and then got my room key and went to my room to get ready for bed. I remember that right before going to sleep, I decided to check out the front window. It was one of those motels that just has a sidewalk in front of the rooms, and then the parking lot is right there. The window was completely covered, but when I moved the cover and looked out, I saw the rusty blue truck parked just in the parking lot in front of my room. Then I noticed that the same guy was in the driver's seat of it. Maybe this was just a coincidence, but it seemed a little bit strange. I went away from the window, got in bed, and then tried falling asleep. I was pretty tired and was able to fall asleep pretty quickly, but sometime in the night I woke up. I just remembered that after I opened my eyes, the first thing I noticed was the sound of somebody trying to open the door to my room. I was suddenly wide awake. The person tried the door a few times and then stopped after not hearing anything for a few moments. I got up and went over to the door. I looked through the peephole but saw nothing, but I did hear a car door closing a distance away in the parking lot. So I went over and looked out of the window. When I did, I saw that nobody was at the door anymore. Then I looked at the blue truck and saw that the man was inside of it, in the driver's seat. That had to have been him. If he had a room here, why wouldn't he be in it? I went over to the phone in the motel room and called the front desk, but nobody answered. I was considering calling the police. I went over to the bed and sat down, trying to relax. It was about 1 a.m. by now. After laying down and going on my phone a little bit, I was starting to feel better. Then suddenly I heard a knock at the door once again. I was instantly on edge. I listened, and after a few moments, whoever was there knocked again. I quietly got up and walked over to the door. After looking through the peephole, I saw the same man was there. Then I went back over to the bed and called the police. I told them what was going on. After I was told they were on the way, I hadn't heard the knocking or anything in a few minutes. I went back over to the window and looked out. The man was still there and still inside of his truck. Then I just had to wait for the police. I kept watching out the window the entire time. After about 5 minutes or so, I saw a police car entering the parking lot. Right when it did, the truck that the man was in started up and began to drive away. The police car noticed this and put on its flashing lights. They both then drove out of my sight. However, about 10 minutes later, another police officer showed up and knocked on my door. He told me that the police had pursued the rusty truck and stopped it. The man was arrested for drunk driving, as well as having other drugs in the car. He denied trying to enter my room but admitted to knocking on the door. I was just glad that he was off the streets for the night. The next morning I was able to make it back home. That was definitely my scariest road trip experience. A few years back I went on a road trip. I traveled quite a bit for work and ended up driving all around the country. On this particular road trip, I found myself driving in sort of the middle of nowhere really late at night. I'm pretty good at staying awake and driving at all kinds of hours, but I need the help of caffeine to do so. So when I sensed that I was starting to get a little bit sleepy, I knew that I needed to stop. If I got out of the car, walked around a little, and had a caffeinated beverage, I would be fine. So after driving down the highway for a few more miles, I saw the sign for a rest stop up ahead. I was happy to see this and I pulled off. This rest stop was right off the highway. I mean, literally right off of it. The exit went right into the parking lot, and then you had to go back onto the highway. There were no other roads. There was also a small woods in the area of land between the stop and the highway. When I pulled in, I noticed that there were 0 other cars around. The rest stop building was also fairly small. I parked my car right in front of the building, got out, and looked around. It was really dark, but there was one dim street lamp a little ways away. Around the building was a little bit of open grass, and then woods on basically all sides of it. The cool air outside felt refreshing, and after stretching my legs, I walked inside of the rest stop. It was an older building. Inside, there was a small lobby with a vending machine and some maps. The restrooms were straight ahead, and then to the right, there was what appeared to be an old restaurant. It was one of those small pizza places that you would sometimes see in rest stops or travel centers, but it was now abandoned, and it looked like it had been for several years. It was sort of spooky. After briefly looking around inside, I figured that I would get something from the vending machine, but first I went into the restroom and used it. While I was in there, I heard footsteps outside in the lobby of the rest stop building. I figured somebody else had stopped. The person did not enter the restroom, though. When I came out of the restroom about 30 seconds later, I didn't see anybody. I went over to the vending machine, got a drink, and then casually walked around a little. I looked out the window and then noticed that my car was still the only one in the entire parking lot. This was strange. I was sure that I heard somebody else inside the building, but where would they have come from? I walked over to the abandoned restaurant, and when I did, I thought I saw somebody moving quickly behind the old counter. It was really dark over there, so I didn't see well, but if somebody was over there and seemingly hiding, I didn't want to get involved. I decided at that point to just leave, so I turned and started walking for the doors. When I was almost there, though, I heard footsteps behind me, like whoever was back there was now leaving as well. After I got out of the doors and was approaching my car, I heard the person leave as well, and they seemed to be moving quickly. I stopped and turned around to look at them. It was a man. He was pretty thin but kind of tall. He was really creepy looking and had long, stringy hair. The guy was headed right towards me and approaching in a really aggressive way. I wouldn't be able to get inside my car on time before he reached me, so I decided to just run. I turned and sprinted through the parking lot. I ran all the way to the other side. At first, the guy started chasing after me, but he soon stopped. When I got to the far end of the parking lot, I turned around and looked. The man was standing right next to my car. I couldn't go back to it. I kept walking, then went into the grass and entered the woods. I just wanted to get out of the guy's view. After walking through the thick woods for a little while, I called 911. After speaking with the operator, I told him my location and what was going on. Then I waited. I could not see the guy from where I was because I was that deep in the woods. Finally, I could sort of see flashing red and blue lights. I came out from the woods and saw a police car next to my car. An officer left his vehicle and started walking behind the building. After a while, he came back over to me and said that when he got there, he thought he saw somebody running behind the building. He went back there but couldn't find the person. He figured they were deep in the woods by then. I talked to him about the situation, and he said that he would call another nearby unit to check behind the building again, but then I could go. After that, I was on my way. I'm not sure if the police found the man or not. I'm guessing he was going to try to steal my car, but who knows? I'm really glad that I got away from him. Something really creepy happened a few months ago when I was on a road trip. I found myself driving really late at night because I was trying to find a hotel. I had stopped at a gas station, but I had no service, so I started driving to hopefully get service in the next town. However, I must have really been in a dead zone, because as I continued driving, I just didn't have any service. After driving for about 20 more minutes, I took the next exit to try to find a gas station again. I still didn't have service, and at that point I was just going to buy a map or see if the worker at the gas station knew of any nearby hotels. After taking the exit, I did not immediately see any gas stations or anything, really. I kept driving and then took another road, hoping that it would be more promising, but it wasn't. This road appeared very quiet, and very shortly after turning onto it, I noticed something strange. There appeared to be two men just sort of standing in the middle of the road. This was confusing. They did not appear to be construction workers right off the bat because they weren't wearing reflective vests or anything. They also did not appear to be police. As I got closer, I saw that they were just wearing regular clothes. However, they both looked right at me as I approached them. I thought they might move off to the side of the road or something. Nothing appeared wrong with the street, and this was not a road that had a sidewalk on it. There were woods on both sides, and it didn't seem like anybody would be out walking around there. The men stood there in the middle of the street, blocking me from passing. I came to a complete stop and had a bad feeling about it. I decided that it would be best to just leave, but before I did, I saw that the men were walking towards me. I lowered my driver's window a little and asked what was going on, but they didn't answer me. They just continued approaching, one of them going towards each side of my car. I then hit reverse and started slowly backing up. One of the men went faster towards me, and I saw the other guy going to the side of the road. At that point, I turned to try to turn my car around so that I could drive the opposite way. I was far enough from the men that I didn't think they would catch me in the small amount of time that I would be stopped. So I went slightly off the road, stopped, put my car in drive, and then started going the opposite way. By now, one of the men had gotten within 30 feet of my car, and the other was a short distance behind that. But the second man was now holding something large. I hit the gas, not knowing what it was, and started to drive away. In my mirror, as I was driving off, I saw the man go down and slide the object. Whatever was slid pretty fast and almost reached my car, but it went off the road right behind me. That's when I realized it was probably a spike strip, the stuff that police use to pop a suspect's tires in a chase. So these guys were trying to pop my tires. But I knew that these men were not police. I kept driving away and got onto the next road, which led to the highway. Then I tried calling the police, but I still had no service. I got back to the highway and drove down for a little while. About 15 minutes later, I finally had service again. Then I called the police. I told them about it, and they said they would go over and look into it. The men were probably gone by then, though, and I never heard anything more about it. I was able to get to a hotel that night and then continue with my road trip. This is something that still freaks me out to this day when I think about it. I'm not sure if those guys were trying to rob me or what, but I'm just really glad that I got away from them. Last year I went on a road trip with my girlfriend. We were taking a vacation, but we chose to drive instead of flying. We did that because we could stop at more places and explore, and also because it was cheaper. This was the second road trip that we had taken together, and the first one was a lot of fun, so we were looking forward to it. When the road trip started, the first day of driving went by really well. We stopped at a few cool places and explored some towns. Then we made it to our hotel for the night. The next day we got up bright and early in the morning and hit the road. We were hoping to make it all the way to our destination by that night. It was a long day of driving, but overall it was fun. However, we ended up driving sort of late into the night. By about 10 p.m., we still had another hour and a half left. I was driving and decided to stop at the next gas station because we were running a little low. Plus, I wanted to get a coffee and some snacks, and my girlfriend wanted coffee as well. So at the next exit, I pulled off the highway. There was a pretty large truck stop with a gas station and a store attached. When I arrived there, I first put more fuel into the car and then parked next to the store. There were a decent number of other cars and trucks around, and this was clearly a popular place for people to stop. My girlfriend and I got out of the car and started walking in. I do remember that as we were walking in, a few other people were as well, including a family with a few children a little bit ahead of us. We got inside the store and first used the restrooms. Then my girlfriend said that she would get the coffee if I wanted to look for some snacks. The store was very large for a truck stop. It had quite a few aisles, and there was a coffee shop type of place attached to it, which is where my girlfriend went. I started to walk through the snack aisles and think about what I wanted to get. A few minutes into that, I noticed a man and a child start to walk into the aisle that I was in. The man was a bit larger and appeared to be in his 40s or so, while the child looked to be about 5 or 6. The man was holding the kid's hand, and it seemed as though after they saw me in the aisle, they turned around and walked out. When I looked at the kid, I remembered seeing him walk into the store with the family ahead of us. I had seen the kid's parents, and this guy was not one of them. I got a bad feeling, like maybe this guy was trying to kidnap the kid or something. I thought about it for a moment, and was 90% sure that this kid didn't belong to him. The way the man was holding onto the child's hand seemed almost like he was dragging him along. I decided to see where the guy was going, so I walked over to the end of the aisle. I didn't immediately see the man, so I scanned around the store. Then I noticed him walking along the back side of the store near the cold drinks. He was still with the child. After making it to the corner of the store, he walked along the next side of it, going toward the exit doors. When I saw this, I walked forward and reached the doors before the man would. Soon, the man and the child reached me. I remember that the man said, "Excuse me," and started to walk around me. But I said, "Wait a minute." The man stopped and looked at me. His face appeared nervous. I flat out asked him if that was his kid and said that I saw the child enter with other parents. The man said yes, it was his son. I looked at the boy, who seemed shy and a little confused. I asked if that was his dad, and he shook his head, saying no. The man then started to open the door anyway and tried to leave with the kid. By now, we had been standing there for almost a minute. I spoke louder, saying that I just wanted the other people to come over and confirm if it was their kid or not. Before I finished speaking, though, the man suddenly let go of the child and just ran out the door. I watched him walk at an extremely fast pace to this old-looking van and get inside of it. I tried looking for the license plate number, but I couldn't see well enough. After that, I walked around the store with the child until we eventually located his parents. When I approached them, I explained the situation. They were understandably upset, but also relieved to have their child back. The parents had 3 other kids, and it turned out that one of the older siblings was supposed to be watching the younger one. I wasn't sure where the man had come from, but I felt fortunate that he hadn't taken the child with him. The police were called, and a thorough investigation ensued. Once everything settled down, my girlfriend and I continued on our journey. Thank you for watching our real horror stories. We hope you enjoyed these spooky tales as much as we loved sharing them with you. If you had fun and want to hear more, please give us a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support means a lot to us and helps us bring you even more thrilling stories. Until next time, take care and stay curious.